I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We're starting tonight with a form of voting that's gaining traction around the country. It's called ranked choice voting. It can be confusing because it can be done differently depending on where you are. Even here in Oregon, what's being done now in Corvallis is different than what's being proposed for the big charter reform here in Portland. So let's dig into what it is and why it's growing in popularity. Most American elections use what's called a plurality system. Voters choose one candidate. Whoever gets the highest percentage of the vote wins, even if they don't get a majority. But more cities and states are joining places like Portland, Maine, which began using ranked choice voting to pick its mayor back in 2011. More about Maine in a moment. But first, an explanation of ranked choice voting from the group Fair Vote, which is promoting the idea.
Ranked choice voting is another voting method which allows voters to rank their candidates in order of preference. In a ranked choice voting election, a candidate needs to earn more than half of the votes to win. All first choices are counted, and if a candidate has a majority, then they win, just like any other election. If not, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated, and voters who picked that candidate as number one will have their votes count for their next choice. This process continues until a candidate earns a majority and is declared the winner.
Okay, so that's how it works. And remember how Portland, Maine is using ranked choice voting? Well, before the 2019 election, NBC talked with the city's mayor, Ethan Strimling, about how that changes the way he and others campaign.
Somebody could easily win this race if there weren't ranked choice voting with 36% of the vote. So that would mean that I could almost ignore the other 65% of the people out there. But because there's ranked choice voting, I can't ignore them. I have to talk to them as well because I need them to rank me second. And I find that once you have those conversations, you can begin to soften some of that gap.
Well, not enough ranked him second. He ended up losing that election in 2019, but he makes a good point. And ranked choice voting continues to spread across the country. A national group pushing the change, again called Fair Vote, they report that 53 cities, 2 states, and 1 county are now all using that system. And several in the Northwest are deciding whether to adopt it, including Seattle, Clark County, and San Juan County in Washington state, along with Portland and Multnomah County here in Oregon. Fair Vote reports the idea is catching fire.
Ranked choice voting is the fastest growing nonpartisan election reform in the country right now because it is improving elections.
Now, we're not here to say that you should vote for or against ranked choice voting, but you should understand it. It's an idea getting a lot of interest. Here in Oregon, Benton County has been working on implementing ranked choice voting for several years now. Voters first approved moving over to ranked choice voting back in 2016. It was approved by a pretty big margin, and it's been working out so well that this year Corvallis decided to use it to elect their new mayor.
Back in 2016, Benton County voters voted to adopt the voting method for certain races on the county level. That ballot measure was successful, and in 2020, Benton County used ranked choice voting for the first time for a commissioner's race. That was successful, and there was also interest on the city level. So earlier this year, in January 2022, our city council voted to adopt ranked choice voting for certain races with candidates with more than 3 candidates.
Corvallis is using that system we talked about earlier. 3 people are running for mayor. If one candidate gets more than 50% of the vote, they're going to win. But if they all get less than 50%, the person who got the lowest number of first choice votes is eliminated. And if you picked that person, then your first place, your votes then go to your second choice pick. If there are more than 3 candidates, the process repeats until someone has 50% of the vote. In Portland, well, that's a bit more tricky. If the charter reform proposal is approved, Portland would switch indeed to ranked choice voting, but, and this is a big difference, the city council people would vote for 3 people per district, and you'd vote for all 3 at once. So you see, that's kind of a little sticky there. It's a problem for some people opposing the measure, like Portland activist Kathleen Sadat, who worries that the winners would not have broad enough support.
It still does not say to me that there's a safe place for someone who's elected to be considered viable at 25% of the vote. At 25% of the vote, we run the risk of having someone who is, I won't call them fringe, I'll call them antagonistic to the way Portland has done things, and to cause more confusion. And if they can stay in with 25% of the vote, it's hard to get them out, especially if they're organized and their constituency is organized.
Okay, so what she's talking about is unlike when you're just voting for like 3 people but only one winner where they get 50% and they win. Here, when you're voting for 3 at the same time, they don't need 50%. They could win with as much as 25% or 27%. And that's the kind of the concern we're starting to hear from folks. We heard that concern from a lot of people, in fact, including our late political analyst Len Bergstein. But a WSU professor in Vancouver who supports the Portland charter change, Mark Steffen, says that 25% number really not as bad as it sounds.
The focus on the 25% ends up being a bit confusing. The fact is that we as voters in a multi-winner district are going to see 3 people elected to the council. And so we're just ranking our choices, but honestly, potentially our first and our second and third choice could all be chosen. And if, let's say, our first choice wasn't even in the race, well, our second and third would have been chosen. The notion of the 25% is about how everyone, all the voters, get at least some shot at having their first choice be elected. And if not their first choice, maybe at least their second choice. Again, it's the same kind of idea that I just laid out. And so really we really are picking 3 candidates. We just happen to rank them because we're trying to allow everyone's preferences to be acknowledged in that. So it's not really about the 25%. It's actually broader support that you'll see for candidates, for the 3 that win in that particular district.
The professor says ranked choice voting is actually a better way to elect candidates because even if you don't get your first choice, you might get someone you're okay with rather than someone that you actually hate.
Usually, most voters are going to get their first or second choice, and they're still going to maybe get someone they're not as satisfied with, but it's not as simple like, okay, who's less worse than the other. Less of that is going on. It's much more about who I really like and who can I accept.
And you can probably tell he thinks it's a great idea and he's promoting it. All right, let's get back to the big picture now. Ranked choice voting is a system that is being used in more and more cities around the U.S. and in more countries around the world. We hear from you a lot when you say you're sick of choosing between what seems like the lesser of 2 evils, and also that you're sick of political attack ads. And as we heard from that former mayor of Portland, Maine, and now from Professor Steffen, ranked choice voting can soften that up to a degree.
It's something that is gaining sort of enthusiasm around the country. There's now talk about thinking about governor's races and congressional races in the same sort of way, because there's a lot of benefits that come with these that are separate just from just the ranking. It's also about how the candidates learn to interact with each other, because with ranked choice voting, you're not wanting to necessarily be first for everyone. You're wanting to be first or second for everyone. And so that means you don't necessarily attack one of the other, the other candidates. You maybe don't attack any of them. You want to be cordial to them. And so all of the negativity that we see in elections right now, especially now in the national elections, that stuff kind of washes away, not completely, but it somewhat washes away when candidates are being ranked versus pick my side or the other side.
Not everybody thinks it's a great idea, though. Over the summer, we talked with skeptics who think the entire Portland charter reform is just way too complicated.
I don't think we should go, as we've said repeatedly, from a government that no one is using to a government that has never been used.
Your new government system is a very distinct issue from how you vote. I understand the commission wants to put these together, but it's not fair to the voters.
By the way, both Clark County and Multnomah County voters will be asked whether to approve the simple version of ranked choice voting, not the complicated version that Portland's looking at. So, what about you? What do you think of ranked choice voting? Share your thoughts with me. Send me an email. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave us a voice message. Our number is 503-226-5090.